On the scale of great revelations, it was a bit like saying that Roger Federer plays a nifty game on grass, or that Rafael Nadal is a very useful clay courter. That tennis has a serious integrity problem with corrupt matches at the lowest tiers of the men's circuit while being, bar isolated pockets, clean at the top should not have come as a huge surprise. This reality, in line with all the data that has been produced in recent years, was the main thrust of the independent review of integrity in tennis, which was published on Wednesday. The sport has paid more than £15 million for its 2-year investigation, and while that may be the cost of an average fullback in the Premier League, it remains a considerable sum in tennis. The interim report came with a few verbal flourishes for illustration. The current tennis environment provides a lamentably fertile breeding ground for breaches of integrity, was one statement, alluding to impoverished wannabe professionals being tempted to make desperately needed money through betting markets. One investigator from the Tennis Integrity Unit described the problem at some lower-level events as a tsunami. A betting operator called the situation grimmer than grim. To put that in perspective, there were 241 basic betting alerts flagged up last year from more than 100,000 matches played on the Pro Tours. Of the alerts, down on the previous year, 193 were at men's futures and challenger events. The well-remunerated work of Adam Lewis QC and his team of lawyers will, nonetheless, have some value. Tennis can no longer, for example, be accused of taking corruption too lightly, or of any systemic attempts to sweep malpractice under the tarpaulin. The panel has not discovered any evidence demonstrating a cover-up in relation to these issues, by the international governing bodies, the TU or anyone else, the report said. There were, though, criticisms along with recommendations. The TU was described as under-resourced and accused of being overly conservative in some investigations, taking a year to get round to do some interviews related to suspicious matches. The Tennis Integrity Board, made up of governing body representatives, was said not to have been assertive enough in its overseeing role. Historically, there was concern about cases dating back to the 2000s that some unnamed offenders may have been advised to retire, rather than face the music, but Lewis held back from anything too stinging, saying merely that the sport reacted behind the curve in the face of the online betting explosion, and that it made errors and missed opportunities. There were some constructive recommendations, which the sports authorities, who jointly fitted the bill, Wimbledon among them, have pledged to implement after a consultation period. Some will be contentious. One particular thrust, sure to be the subject of wrangling, is that the sale of official live scores beamed from the lowest tier tournaments, which facilitates in-match betting, should be discontinued. The current deal is worth some £13 million annually to the sport, and Lewis cited a direct correlation between the swift growth in betting alerts and the introduction of this service by Sportradar in 2012, saying that should have been considered. The counter-argument is that any vacuum will be filled by black market operators and courtsiders, filing scores by phone. While no reference has been made to top players in the report, the biggest stars will be unhappy at the suggestion that appearance fees, permitted at middle-ranking tournaments, be made public. These could be seen, it is said, as an incentive for someone to pocket the money and tank unless they are strictly performance-related. Less contentious recommendations include an independent supervisory board to replace the TIB, a streamlined pathway to the professional game. Moves are already afoot, and the removal of integrity investigators from the International Tennis Federation's Roehampton offices, to be based more internationally. The idea of removing betting company sponsorships at tournaments, however, to set a good example, looks more like window dressing. In his presentation, Lewis played down, slightly surprisingly, the influence of organized crime, and contrary to some expectations, he did not insist that the fight against corruption be specifically linked to that against doping. To many neutral observers, the latter is at least as big a threat to the integrity of the sport, and not just at the highest level.